Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today we're going to tackle a massive frustration that, honestly, almost every single 3D artist and animator faces at some point in their journey. We're diving into exactly why your 3D animations might still feel robotic, lifeless, and just kind of stiff, even after you've spent countless hours binge-watching tutorials online. If you've ever felt like you're doing absolutely everything right technically, but the final render is just missing that elusive spark of life, well, you are in the exact right place. Let's get right into it.
So, why is your animation stiff? Think about your most recent projects. You've probably watched 100 different tutorials by now, right? You perfectly copied the character rig the instructor used, you dialed in the lighting, placed the camera in the exact same spot, and meticulously matched every single keyframe in the graph editor. You tweaked those Bezier curves exactly how they told you to. You did everything right. Yet somehow, when you hit render and play it back, the final result is totally lifeless. It feels incredibly mechanical, kind of like an animatronic at a theme park rather than a living, breathing character. It's an incredibly common scenario, and we need to figure out exactly why this happens, so we can uncover the hidden roadblock in your workflow.
All right, Section 1. The problem. The tutorial paradox.
Basically, the tutorial paradox is this phenomenon where consuming more tutorials actually makes it harder to create original, lifelike work. Now look, just to be clear, tutorials are amazing for learning the basic tools. They're phenomenal for helping you memorize hotkeys, figure out the interface, and save you hours of sheer software frustration when you're just starting out. But the paradox kicks in when you start relying on them for your creativity. You learn how to seamlessly follow instructions, and because of that, you freeze up the second you open a completely blank scene without an instructor whispering in your ear, telling you whether to pose the spine first, or start with the hips, or where the line of action should go. You end up having all the tools, but literally zero direction.
It all really comes down to a core conflict: following instructions versus making decisions. When you're just clicking the buttons, navigating the menus, and copying the exact IK and FK switches you're told to use, you're merely reproducing a result. You're successfully mimicking the instructor's project. And sure, that creates this massive illusion of progress in the moment because you end up with a really cool render on your screen, but you aren't learning how to make the independent, foundational, creative decisions required for original art. You're learning the what to do and the how to do it, but you're completely missing the why. And honestly, if you don't know why a keyframe was placed on frame 12 instead of frame 14, you haven't actually learned animation.
Let's move on to Section 2, the agitation, the copy trap.
To fix this stiffness, we have to shift our mindset right now. We have to stop looking at technical failures, like assuming you just don't know the software well enough, and start looking at creative failures. Animation isn't just movement, it's a performance. Think of it like asking two different actors to say the exact same sentence. The script, the actual words, are identical, but their performances can feel completely different based on the specific choices each actor makes. One might whisper it in absolute terror, the other might scream it in a rage. Animation works the exact same way. If you just move a character's rig without dialing in a performance, it's always going to look like a robot, no matter how clean your topology is.
You see, beginners usually focus purely on the mechanics, just getting a character's hand from point A to point B to grab a cup of coffee off a desk. But professional animators, they ask entirely different questions before they even set their very first keyframe. Why is the character reaching for the cup? Are they completely exhausted after pulling an all-nighter? Are they in a rush because they're late for work? Those underlying emotional states are what actually dictate the timing, the weight, and the easing of the movement in the graph editor. An exhausted character is going to have a much slower, heavier curve with entirely different spacing than an energetic, rushed character. Without these thoughts and feelings backing it up, the movement is purely mechanical.
And here's the real danger of the copy trap. When you replicate a tutorial step by step, you're blindly copying hidden emotional and storytelling decisions that you don't fully understand. The instructor might have adjusted the timing of a walk cycle specifically because their character was supposed to be nervous and hesitant. Or they might have chosen a very specific low-angle camera shot to build suspense and make the character look imposing. Or maybe they added a deliberate 1-second pause just to let an emotional realization land with the audience before the character moves again. If you simply copy those keyframes and camera placements without understanding the underlying reason behind them, it is completely impossible to adapt those skills to your own unique scenes. The second the tutorial video ends, your creative process ends right along with it. Which brings us to Section 3, the mindset shift, thinking like a pro.
Now, professionals definitely still use tutorials to learn new software updates or new rendering engines, but they treat the software strictly as a tool. Instead of asking the internet which button to press, they turn to real life. They actively observe real people. They record their own reference videos, literally standing up, acting out the scene in their room, and paying close attention to exactly where their weight shifts before they take a step. They study classic films frame by frame to see how poses read on screen, and they heavily analyze subtle body language. Observation becomes their actual teacher. This is exactly why experienced animators improve so much faster than beginners, even when they're sitting at the exact same desk using the exact same software version.
Okay, Section 4. The solution: escaping the paradox.
So how do we actually fix this? Here's an absolute game changer of a 4-step process to break the cycle. Step 1, watch one tutorial. Just one. Instead of mindlessly binge watching 10 tutorials in a row to get a fake sense of productivity, stop at a single video. Step 2, close it completely. Step 3, recreate the result entirely from memory. Now, fair warning, this is going to be incredibly uncomfortable, and I guarantee your first attempt will probably look terrible. A character's arm might literally break backwards because you forgot an IK constraint, but it will instantly expose what you actually understand versus what you were simply copying like a parrot. And finally, step 4, change something.
Once you've recreated that base tutorial from memory, step 4 is to actively force yourself to make intentional, creative choices by changing specific variables. Swap out the flat studio lighting for moody, high-contrast cinematic lighting. Try a completely different camera focal length. See what happens if you use a wide 24mm lens instead of an 85mm lens. Force the character to convey a different emotion. Make them deeply sad instead of happy, and see how you have to stretch out those Bezier curves to adjust the timing. Or use a totally different character model with different physical proportions. Every single change you make here forces you to rely on your own artistic judgment rather than a step-by-step guide.
Doing this requires a massive, crucial pivot in your journey. The moment you stop asking, how did they make this, and start asking, why did they make it this way, your growth changes completely. You absolutely have to shift your mindset away from merely memorizing where buttons are located in a 3D workspace. You need to start analyzing the deep emotion, the physical weight, and the storytelling intention behind the design. Once you start asking why, you stop being a software operator and you officially become a digital artist.
Ultimately, tutorials are a starting point, not the destination. Remember, stiff animation is rarely ever caused by a lack of software knowledge. Honestly, you probably already know where all the tools are. You know how to add keyframes, you know where the graph editor is, and you know how to parent objects. The stiffness is almost always caused by a lack of real-world observation, a lack of storytelling, and a lack of intentional, emotional choices. Use tutorials to get your footing and learn the basic interface, sure, but then intentionally step off the paved path and start blazing your own trail.
So I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative question to reflect on regarding your own daily habits. How many tutorials have you watched this month? And how many truly original, purely from scratch animations have you created? If that ratio is heavily skewed towards watching tutorials, it's time to make a serious change. I challenge you to step out of the tutorial paradox today. Open up a completely blank scene, don't look at YouTube, make some bold, intentional choices, and bring your animations to life. Thank you so much for joining me in this explainer, and keep creating.